What if I asked you, who is the most important person in the world? You might answer with a political leader, an influential billionaire, or perhaps a globally renowned celebrity. But let's engage in a bit of imaginative thinking and travel back in time, specifically more than 2,000 years ago, around 300 BC. Who, do you think, would have been considered the most important person in the world at that time? If you asked anyone in those days, the answer would likely be unanimous: Alexander the Great. This man was the king of Macedonia, leading a colossal empire that stretched across large parts of Europe and Asia. His realm was so vast, so significant, that he has been immortalized in history with the title The Great. But now, let's delve a bit deeper into this reflection. What if you asked Alexander the Great himself, who is the most important person to you? Whom do you deeply admire? Who is someone you dream of meeting one day? His answer, believe it or not, would likely be Diogenes the Cynic. Yes, the very same Diogenes you might have come across in your readings, or whom you may have vaguely heard about in a philosophy class. That philosopher known for his revolutionary ideas, his scathing critiques of society, and of course, for peculiar episodes such as challenging Plato, meeting with Alexander, and the curious fact of living in a barrel. But who really was this figure? How did Diogenes become such an emblematic character? How did his philosophy shape and influence the thought and culture of ancient Greece? And what exactly did he aim to convey with his sharp social criticisms? Prepare for a journey back in time as we explore the life, philosophy, and legacy of one of the most provocative and intriguing thinkers of antiquity. Welcome to the world of Diogenes the Cynic. No people have left as profound a mark on history as the Greeks, a civilization that laid the groundwork for so many fundamental elements of Western culture and thought. At the heart of this remarkable legacy stands the figure of Diogenes, a philosopher who not only thought but lived his ideas in a radical way. The aim here is not to narrate every detail of Diogenes' life. After all, we are discussing a period that dates back to 300 years before Christ, so you can imagine there's not much left of Diogenes' life to tell. What remains, and what is invaluable, are the accounts of his actions and words, and his fierce criticisms of his society. His teachings are over 2,000 years old, but fit perfectly into modern times. Ancient Greece, with its stratified society and time devoted to reflection, served as the perfect melting pot for the emergence of such philosophies. The citizens, freed from daily concerns thanks to the labor of servants and slaves, could dedicate themselves to politics, war, and, of course, philosophy. It is in this setting that Socrates, the great philosopher, influences countless generations and gives rise to figures like Antisthenes, the founder of Cynicism. Cynic, originally derived from the Greek word kynikos, relates to dog-like and aptly reflects the stripped-down nature of this philosophy that Antisthenes and later Diogenes would embrace and embody. Antisthenes, in spreading his ideas, found in Diogenes not just a student, but a true exemplar of cynicism. Diogenes was not content with just following his master's teachings. He embodied them, taking them to a new level. Diogenes transcended theory by rejecting almost all social and material conventions, adopting a way of life that many viewed as extreme. He chose to live with the absolute minimum, not out of contempt for comfort, but as a way to question what is truly necessary for life. His detachment from material possessions and his direct, often disconcerting approach challenged the norms of Athens and provoked reflections on the true meaning of freedom, happiness, and virtue. The cynicism of Diogenes was not a philosophy of disdain, but of challenge, an invitation to examine our lives and question the validity of our priorities and values. He did not seek followers, but aimed to awaken people to the reality of their own lives and the social structures that restricted them. To him, wealth, privilege, and power, which are usually attributed to successful people, should be utterly scorned. He renounced his house, his clothes, and all his belongings. Accounts say that Diogenes began living inside a barrel in the middle of Athens. His only possessions were the clothes on his back, a lantern, and a bowl for drinking water. But one day, Diogenes saw a man drinking water from the river by scooping it up with his hands. This made him realize that the bowl was a luxury item and that he no longer needed it, discarding it immediately. A concept often misunderstood that Diogenes the Cynic embraced was materialism. Contrary to common perception, Diogenes' philosophy was not about the total renunciation of material goods, but rather about understanding and re-evaluating the true value of these goods. Observing the life of Diogenes, one might easily assume that he practiced a form of immaterialism, living with the bare minimum and rejecting the conveniences of everyday life. However, the reality is more complex. To illustrate this point, consider the example of a monk who isolates himself on a mountain. At first glance, this monk appears to renounce all material possessions, but at its core, he is engaged in a profound investigation into the real and essential value of things. This is the crux of Diogenes' materialism, not a total rejection of material goods, but a critique of how these are valued by society. Diogenes questioned why certain objects are considered necessary or desirable, challenging the social norms that assign value to things without intrinsic importance. Consider, for a moment, your own environment, how society encourages the desire for goods that are superfluous rather than essential. Diogenes saw this behavior as a trap, one that diverts people from the pursuit of true happiness and virtue. He demonstrated this dramatically by living without the amenities considered indispensable, like a house or even a simple bowl. His act of discarding his bowl was not just a gesture of renunciation, but a deeply materialistic symbolic act in the philosophical sense. He challenged people to reconsider what they really need to live and what is merely excess imposed by culture or society. Diogenes didn't stop with the rejection of physical objects. He took his questioning to the very fabric of human existence. Why do we live the way we do? What are the real necessities of life? These are the questions he explored and invites us to explore. Being called a dog and living on the fringes of society, Diogenes embraced the freedom this position afforded him. He used this freedom to expose the hypocrisy and superficiality of social values, always questioning and never accepting norms without criticism. This made him quite unpopular with some. In a scene vividly illustrating his experience and philosophy, Diogenes was seen calmly eating leftovers in the market, a scene that for many might seem a portrait of humiliation or misery. However, for Diogenes, it was simply a moment of life, an expression of his total independence from social norms. When surrounded and insulted, called by many a dog, he did not react with violence or submission, but with a question that disarmed his aggressors and forced them to reflect. Who here is really the dog? I, who am merely feeding myself, or you, who gather around me, shouting, judging, and barking? While we complain about what we have in abundance, animals do not worry about luxury or excess. Diogenes believed that precisely because animals live in a natural way, they are much happier than humans, who create their own dissatisfaction. In a society that often values excess and superficiality, Diogenes' philosophy offers a challenging perspective. He incites us to look beyond consumerist materialism and to seek a deeper understanding of what we truly value and why. By doing so, we may discover a more authentic and meaningful way of life, free from the shackles of ceaseless desire and superficial satisfaction. Thus, Diogenes' materialism is not about having less for the sake of having less, but about understanding more deeply what we have and why we have it. It is a call to evaluate our lives and our values to find true wealth in simplicity, self-sufficiency, and virtue. Diogenes, a symbolic figure of ancient Greece, lived during an era considered by many as the zenith of civilization and culture. Amidst a society full of great thinkers, he chose to wage a war against excess and superficiality, challenging the established customs and moral traditions. This radical stance put him on a direct path of confrontation with the values of his time, a path he walked with the same determination and detachment that Schopenhauer would come to admire centuries later. Both shared a critical view of the nature of the world and humanity, convinced that the reality in which we live is far from praiseworthy. Diogenes' skepticism knew no bounds. He materialized his disbelief in society through symbolic gestures, like his famous daytime walk with a lit lantern. When asked what he was doing, he replied, "I am searching for an honest man." This act was not just a critique of the lack of integrity he saw around him, but also a direct challenge to his contemporaries' convictions about truth and morality. The Greek society, though advanced, was immersed in politics, a field Diogenes viewed with great suspicion. He believed that politics was a tool for control, not a path to true fulfillment or honesty. His disdain for the political system reflected his conviction that true virtue lay outside the structures of power and authority. In the year 300 BC, the most respected figure in the known world was Alexander the Great, monarch of the vast Macedonian Empire and an unparalleled strategist, whose fame lay in his invincibility on the battlefield. In stark contrast to Alexander's grandeur, we have Diogenes, who chose an existence of absolute simplicity, living as a beggar in the streets. Alexander's education was marked by the wisdom of Aristotle, one of the era's great philosophers, who introduced him to the vast domains of Greek knowledge, including the thoughts of Diogenes. This exposure instilled in Alexander an admiration for the Cynic way of life, awakening in him a deep desire to meet and learn from Diogenes. After conquering Greece, Alexander, filled with curiosity and respect, sought out Diogenes, who, according to accounts, he found relaxing under the sun, enjoying the simplicity of his existence, inside a barrel. The sight of Diogenes, stripped of any luxury and completely indifferent to the power and prestige that Alexander represented, puzzled and at the same time fascinated the great conqueror. Moved by admiration and a desire to help, Alexander offered to grant Diogenes anything his heart desired. Diogenes' response was emblematic of his philosophy. He simply said, "You can help me by getting out of the way and stopping blocking the sun." This interaction, marked by a direct refusal of authority and materialism, highlighted the independence and freedom that Diogenes valued above all else. The conversation between them was a powerful demonstration of mutual respect, though marked by a fundamental divergence of values. Alexander, impressed with Diogenes' firmness and authenticity, proclaimed that, if he could not be himself, he would like to be Diogenes. This statement not only reflects the impact Diogenes had on Alexander, but also underlines the essence of cynicism, a life lived in true freedom, unencumbered by the chains of wealth, status, or power. The meeting between Diogenes and Alexander serves as a powerful metaphor for the confrontation between two worldviews, one that values external power and material achievements, and another that cherishes inner freedom and self-sufficiency. Diogenes challenged social conventions and notions of authority, living according to his own terms and demonstrating that true authority comes from a commitment to honesty and simplicity. Diogenes' cynicism, far from being a mere rejection of the world, was an invitation to see beyond appearances and recognize the fundamental equality of all human beings. He reminds us that, in the end, we are all made of the same substance, subject to the same needs and fates. Diogenes did not seek to humiliate others, but to enlighten, exposing the futility of pride and pretension. On a day like any other, Diogenes was found by Alexander while sorting through human bones, a scene that perplexed the conqueror. Unable to comprehend what he saw, Alexander asked Diogenes the purpose of his action. Without hesitation, Diogenes replied that he was trying to distinguish the bones of a king from those of a slave, vividly illustrating his view that, in the face of death, everyone is equal. Imagine telling one of the greatest leaders of all time that he is equal to his slave. In 300 BC, only a person with no attachment to humanity can see such a truth. Your knowledge is limited to the mere spectrum of morality. How many things do you fail to know because you think you are better than another? How much truth do you fail to see? The cynicism of Diogenes is not about humiliating man, but rather about seeing the real value of things, about seeing who we really are, and about putting humanity in its rightful place. When we think we are superior, we end up placing ourselves on a pedestal of gods, but we are not gods. We are humans who make mistakes and learn, and Diogenes the Cynic tries to show us this. We should not idolize this man, for he would be disappointed if that were to happen. But just like Alexander the Great, if I were not who I am, I would like to be Diogenes the Cynic. If you've made it this far, it means that this journey through the world of philosophy has awakened something in you. Turn that spark into a flame. Explore Essence of Wisdom, the definitive guide that simplifies the history of philosophy, making it accessible, engaging, and deeply relevant and applicable to your life. The link is pinned in the comments below. Thank you for staying until the end and follow the White Rabbit.